The morning started like any other. The sun had just risen, spilling warm light across the city streets, and the air carried a mix of excitement and calm. Inside a sleek, newly opened jewelry store, the CEO, a confident and determined black woman, was getting ready for an important meeting. She had built her business from the ground up, facing challenges that often tested her patience, resilience, and determination. Every piece of jewelry in her store reflected not just craftsmanship but her journey, long nights, careful planning, and a dream she refused to let go of. Today was supposed to be routine, just another step toward expanding her vision. Dressed in a tailored suit that radiated professionalism, she entered the store carrying a sense of purpose. Her heels clicked softly on the polished floor, and her presence commanded attention without demanding it. She walked toward the front counter to meet with a supplier who had traveled a long way to discuss some upcoming collections. The store looked immaculate, the displays gleaming under the warm lights, and for a moment she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. This was her vision come to life. But as she approached the counter, something unexpected happened. The manager on duty, a middle-aged man who had been running the store in her absence, froze for a moment. His eyes shifted uncomfortably and his body language changed as soon as he saw her. She greeted him politely, asking to finalize the details of the upcoming shipment. "I'm sorry, but we can't help you right now," the manager said, his tone hesitant but firm. She blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me?" she asked, thinking she might have misheard him. The manager repeated himself, now more insistently. "You can't be helped at this moment. We have other tasks, and this isn't a good time." Her confusion quickly turned into a sharp realization. She wasn't a random customer. She was the CEO and owner of the store. She had built this business with her own hands, invested time, money, and energy into every detail. Yet here was someone blocking her from even completing a routine task. For a few seconds she stood frozen, taking in the situation. Customers nearby were starting to notice the tension. Some were glancing curiously, others looking uncomfortable, sensing that something was wrong but unsure what it was. The manager's dismissive attitude, the way he avoided eye contact, and the unnecessary hesitation made it clear to her that this was more than just a misunderstanding. It was discrimination. She felt a mixture of emotions, surprise, frustration, and a quiet determination rising within her. The instinct to react angrily crossed her mind, but she knew better. She had faced adversity many times before, and she understood that losing control could make the situation worse. Instead, she chose to remain calm, steady, and deliberate. "Can you explain why I am being denied service?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. The manager hesitated, stammering slightly. "It's just procedures, policies. You know, rules we have to follow." She raised an eyebrow, sensing the weak excuse. She could see clearly that his words were not true. He was uncomfortable because he had made a choice based on bias, not policy. She looked around and noticed a few employees watching quietly from a distance. They exchanged subtle glances, some nodding slightly as if silently encouraging her. She realized she wasn't completely alone. There were people who understood the truth of the situation and respected her as a leader. Instead of escalating the situation with anger, she decided to gather evidence. Pulling out her phone, she discreetly recorded the conversation. Every hesitation, every dismissive gesture, every false excuse was captured. She knew that having a clear record of what happened would be useful later, not just for accountability but also to make sure the truth was known. While doing this, she remained composed, projecting confidence and control. She noticed some customers whispering, some looking shocked, and a few even exchanging questioning glances with the manager. The tension in the store was palpable, and she realized that this moment could define the atmosphere for the rest of the day. If she handled it well, she could turn a negative experience into a teaching moment for her staff and a demonstration of strong leadership for her customers. The manager's tone began to change slightly as he noticed the recording. His defensiveness grew, and he started to argue, insisting that she didn't understand the situation fully. "We just can't serve you right now," he said again, trying to sound firm but revealing his uncertainty. She decided it was time to take control of the conversation. "I am the owner of this store," she said clearly, making eye contact with him. "I built this business, and I have every right to be served and to oversee operations. What is happening right now is unacceptable." The manager shifted uneasily, mumbling something under his breath. She could tell he realized he had overstepped, but pride or stubbornness was keeping him from apologizing. She could also see the discomfort in other staff members' faces. They were uncomfortable, not knowing how to respond. Some employees avoided looking at him directly, while others glanced at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. She realized that her calm but assertive stance was giving them courage. At that moment, she reflected briefly on how far she had come. She remembered the long hours spent planning the business, the sacrifices made, the challenges faced as a Black woman trying to succeed in a world that often underestimates people like her. She thought about the moments when she was dismissed, overlooked, or judged unfairly, and how she had learned to respond with composure and strategy rather than anger. This was just another test of her resilience and leadership. The manager, still flustered, tried to regain control. "It's not personal," he said, a weak attempt at justification. She shook her head slightly, her expression steady. "It is personal because it affects how this store operates and how customers are treated. Discrimination of any kind has no place here, whether it's intentional or not." By now, other customers were watching intently, sensing the tension and the injustice unfolding. Some whispered to each other, while others seemed to admire her calm authority. She knew that handling this moment well would not only reinforce her leadership, but also set an example for her staff about professionalism, integrity, and the importance of standing up against unfair treatment. Instead of prolonging the confrontation at the counter, she decided to address it in a way that ensured clarity and authority. She asked the manager to step aside with her to a more private area of the store, where they could speak without interruptions. The staff watched silently, curious and cautious as she guided him toward the back office. Her tone remained polite but firm, her body language confident, and her mind focused on resolving the situation effectively. As they walked, she kept her composure, thinking about the steps she would take. She knew that this wasn't just about a single incident. It was about the culture of the store, the example set for employees, and the message sent to customers. Allowing such behavior to continue unchecked could harm the reputation she had worked so hard to build. She needed to act decisively but thoughtfully, ensuring that justice and professionalism prevailed. Once they reached the back office, she faced the manager directly. "I need you to understand the gravity of this situation," she said calmly. "Your behavior today was unacceptable, disrespectful, and discriminatory. This is not a reflection of what we stand for as a business. I need you to explain yourself honestly." The manager fumbled, giving weak excuses about stress, procedures, and misunderstandings. But she could see through them. She didn't need anger or confrontation to assert her authority. Her calm demeanor, clear voice, and unwavering confidence communicated everything that needed to be said. The CEO knew that this moment was crucial. How she handled it would shape the future of the store, influence employee behavior, and leave a lasting impression on customers. She realized that leadership was not just about making decisions when things were easy. It was about taking control in moments of challenge, standing firm in the face of injustice, and ensuring that values of respect and fairness were upheld. As she listened to the manager's excuses, she felt a quiet certainty building inside her. She would not allow discrimination, disrespect, or incompetence to undermine her business. And in the next few minutes, she would take decisive action to make sure that her store reflected the values she had worked so hard to establish. In that small, tense office, the CEO's mind was clear. She was in control, she was unshaken, and she was ready to turn an uncomfortable, unjust moment into a lesson in leadership, integrity, and courage. What had started as a shocking, almost humiliating situation was about to become a defining moment, not just for her, but for everyone in the store who would witness her handling of it. The moment in the back office was tense. The manager stood awkwardly, shifting from one foot to the other, clearly unsure of what to say next. The CEO, however, remained calm. She didn't need to raise her voice or make threats. Her presence alone communicated authority and control. She could see clearly that the manager's excuses were just that, excuses. He had chosen to block her earlier, not out of any legitimate reason, but because of bias and poor judgment. Instead of letting frustration take over, she decided to focus on the facts. "When I arrived at the counter, you refused to assist me," she began, her voice steady. "I am the owner of this store. I built it from the ground up. I have every right to be here and to oversee operations. What you did is completely unacceptable." The manager mumbled something about following store procedures, but it sounded hollow and forced. She didn't interrupt him. She let him speak, listening carefully to every word. This was not just about him. It was about setting a standard for everyone in the store, showing them that professionalism and respect were non-negotiable. She thought about her employees, some of whom were quietly watching from the main floor. They were unsure how to react, but they looked to her for guidance. Leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about demonstrating courage, fairness, and composure, especially when the situation was uncomfortable. By remaining calm, she was already teaching a lesson that would be remembered. She took a deep breath, allowing herself a brief moment to gather her thoughts. This was more than a confrontation. It was a test of her patience, of her resolve, and of the culture she wanted to cultivate in her business. She reminded herself that reacting out of anger could undermine everything she had worked for. Instead, she needed to respond with clarity and strategy. "Let's be clear," she continued, her tone firm but professional. "This is not about rules or procedures. This is about respect. Respect for me as the owner, respect for our employees, and respect for our customers. Denying me service because of who I am or how I look is discrimination, plain and simple. That behavior cannot continue here, and it will not be tolerated." The manager's eyes flicked toward the floor. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware that he had crossed a line. He tried to explain himself again, this time mentioning stress and misunderstandings, but she could tell the words were empty. His body language betrayed him. His shoulders were slumped, his hands fidgeting. At that moment, she made a conscious choice. She would document everything that had happened, not out of anger, but to ensure accountability. Pulling out her phone again, she discreetly recorded the manager's responses. Every hesitation, every weak excuse, every dismissive gesture was captured. She knew that having a clear record would serve multiple purposes. It would reinforce her position, provide evidence if needed, and also remind the staff that professionalism and fairness were valued above all else. She noticed a few employees peeking from the main floor, curiosity written across their faces. Some looked nervous, unsure how this confrontation would end. Others seemed quietly impressed by her composure and the way she handled the situation. She knew that they were learning something important in real time, that leadership wasn't just about giving orders. It was about setting an example, even in difficult situations. The CEO continued to speak, keeping her words measured and deliberate. "I need to understand why this happened. I need honesty, not excuses. If there's confusion about policies, we can clarify them together. But denying service to the owner of this store is unacceptable, and it undermines the culture we are trying to build here." The manager hesitated, swallowing hard. He looked around as if searching for an escape. She could see that he realized the seriousness of the situation, but pride and embarrassment kept him from admitting fault outright. She allowed him a moment to speak, demonstrating that she valued transparency and accountability over confrontation. Finally, he muttered something about misunderstanding and feeling overwhelmed. The words were weak, but they confirmed what she already knew. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a reflection of attitude, judgment, and lack of respect. She couldn't let it slide, because doing so would send the wrong message to the rest of her team and to anyone who came into the store. The CEO knew she needed to make a decision quickly. Every moment she hesitated could undermine her authority. She considered the options, weighing the impact on her business, her staff, and her customers. One thing was clear. The behavior needed immediate correction, and she had to demonstrate that the store's values were non-negotiable. She spoke again, calmly and firmly. "I cannot allow this behavior to continue. Our store stands for respect, professionalism, and fairness. Anyone who undermines those principles cannot remain in a position of authority here. I need you to understand that this is serious and that action will be taken immediately." The manager looked down, realizing the gravity of his actions. He tried to offer explanations, but she remained composed, listening politely, but without giving in to excuses. Her demeanor communicated that she was in control and that the outcome was certain. During this time, she also thought about the customers who had witnessed part of the confrontation. She wanted to ensure that their experience remained positive, that they saw leadership in action rather than chaos. Handling difficult situations gracefully wasn't just about managing staff. It was about protecting the reputation of her store and ensuring trust with her customers. She decided that transparency was important. After addressing the manager privately, she would return to the main floor to reassure the staff and customers that the issue was being resolved. By doing so, she could turn an uncomfortable moment into an opportunity to demonstrate integrity, decisiveness, and the importance of standing up against discrimination. At that point, she asked the manager to take a seat and remain calm while she considered the next steps. She knew that patience and composure were key. Reacting impulsively could escalate tension and make the situation harder to manage. She needed to act thoughtfully but decisively. While waiting, she reflected briefly on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the long hours spent building her business, the obstacles she had faced as a Black woman in industries where she was often underestimated, and the determination that had carried her through countless challenges. Each challenge had taught her resilience, and this was just another test of her strength and leadership. Her phone buzzed with messages from employees checking in quietly. They had sensed the tension and wanted to support her. She replied briefly, reassuring them that everything was under control. Their quiet support reminded her that she was not alone, that leadership was not just about authority, but about inspiring trust, respect, and confidence among those around her. After a few moments, she spoke again, this time more decisively. "I have heard your explanations, but they do not excuse your behavior. Denying service to the owner of this store cannot happen, and this reflects a failure in judgment and professionalism." The manager nodded slightly, acknowledging her words without speaking. She could see the recognition of fault in his expression, but she also knew that acknowledgement alone wasn't enough. Actions needed to follow words, and consequences were necessary to maintain the integrity of the store. She took another deep breath, feeling a sense of clarity and determination. She would handle the situation swiftly and fairly, ensuring that the message was clear to everyone. Respect, fairness, and professionalism were not negotiable, and any deviation from those standards would be addressed immediately. Finally, she made her decision. Within minutes, she would take action to correct the situation, demonstrating leadership, courage, and integrity. The tense moment in the back office was about to become a turning point, not just for the manager, but for the culture of the store and the employees who had witnessed the unfolding events. The CEO remained calm, steady and fully in control, ready to turn a difficult confrontation into a lesson in accountability, leadership, and the unwavering importance of respect in her business. She knew that the steps she was about to take would define the future of the store, influence her team, and leave a lasting impression on everyone who walked through the doors. The CEO had been patient, calm, and composed. She had given the manager every opportunity to explain himself, to clarify the situation, and to show accountability. But now it had become clear that excuses and half-hearted apologies would not suffice. The confrontation had reached a point where a firm decision was necessary, and she was ready to act. She had spent years building this business, nurturing a culture of respect and professionalism, and she could not allow one person's poor judgment to undermine everything she had worked for. She asked the manager to sit down again, her tone steady but firm. "I've listened to your explanations, and I understand that you feel overwhelmed or confused. But this is not acceptable. Denying service to the owner of this store is a serious violation of trust and professionalism. We need to take action." The manager shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He opened his mouth to speak but stopped, realizing that words alone could not undo what had happened. The CEO continued, maintaining eye contact and ensuring her presence communicated authority. Every action, every word, every pause was deliberate. She knew that leadership in moments like this was not about anger. It was about clarity, control, and decisiveness. "I am giving you a choice," she said calmly. "You can either acknowledge your mistake and commit to immediate corrective action, or we will have to make a change in management. I cannot allow behavior like this to continue, and the culture of this store cannot be compromised." The manager hesitated, his pride and discomfort evident. He began to stammer, offering more explanations, but she interrupted, politely maintaining her composure. "This is not about excuses," she said. "It is about accountability and respect. We all make mistakes, but we are responsible for how we address them. Right now, the right action must follow." The CEO could feel the tension in the room. It was thick, almost tangible. But she remained calm, steady, and in control. She was fully aware that this moment was not only about addressing a single incident, It was about setting a precedent for her staff, for her customers, and for herself. Leadership required courage, and she was determined to demonstrate it fully. As she spoke, she thought about the employees who were watching from the main floor. She knew that they were paying close attention, absorbing not just the outcome but the process, the calm authority, the measured words, the unwavering confidence. Leadership was often learned by example, and she wanted to set the right one. She wanted her team to understand that professionalism, fairness, and respect were non-negotiable, no matter the situation or the person involved. She took a deep breath and continued. We have invested a lot in this business. Our customers trust us. Our employees rely on a professional environment. And our store's reputation depends on integrity. I cannot allow behavior that undermines any of that. You need to understand the seriousness of this situation. The manager's posture stiffened. He was realizing the gravity of his actions. He had not only disrespected the owner, but had risked creating an uncomfortable situation for employees and customers. His hesitation, the stammering, the shifting, everything made it clear that he understood, at least on some level, that he had failed to act appropriately. The CEO knew that time was critical. Every moment of delay could allow doubt or confusion to linger, and she wanted a swift resolution. She also wanted to ensure that the decisions she made reinforced the store's values and sent a clear message to everyone present. Leadership required not just words, but action. Here's what we're going to do, she said, her voice calm but decisive. You will no longer serve in this position. Effective immediately, your role in management is terminated. I cannot allow behavior like this in my store, and this decision is final. The manager's face went pale. He tried to protest, to explain himself further, but she did not give him the opportunity. Her decision was clear, deliberate, and non-negotiable. I have made my decision, she said firmly. This is about the standards we uphold, the culture we maintain, and the respect that every individual deserves. There will be no further discussion on this matter. For a few moments there was silence in the room. The tension was almost suffocating, but she remained composed. She could feel the weight of the situation, the responsibility she carried as a leader, and the eyes of her employees and customers observing every move. But she did not waver. She knew that leadership was not about popularity or comfort. It was about making the right decisions even when they are difficult. She then turned her attention to the rest of the staff. Walking out of the office, she addressed them directly, ensuring that her tone was calm and professional. We've had a staffing situation that needed immediate attention, she explained. It has been resolved. We will continue to maintain the high standards of professionalism, respect, and service that define this store. The staff watched her carefully. Some nodded subtly. Others whispered among themselves, clearly impressed by her calm handling of a difficult situation. By addressing them openly, she reinforced the values she wanted to cultivate in her store. Values of accountability, respect, and integrity. She also made a point to reassure the customers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation. She approached them, smiled warmly, and explained briefly that a staffing issue had been addressed. Her demeanor was calm, professional, and composed, giving them confidence that the store was well managed and trustworthy. Some customers whispered to each other, clearly impressed by how she handled the situation with dignity and authority. Back in the office, the former manager collected his belongings. He was quiet, subdued, and fully aware of the consequences of his actions. She allowed him to leave without further confrontation, understanding that the lesson had already been made clear. His departure marked not just the end of a troubling incident, but the beginning of a new standard for the store, one in which respect, fairness, and professionalism would be upheld consistently. After the situation was resolved, the CEO took a moment to reflect. She knew that this confrontation could have escalated, could have created chaos, or even damaged the reputation of the store. But by staying calm, composed, and deliberate, she had turned a potentially negative moment into a demonstration of leadership and integrity. She had shown her employees, her customers, and herself what it meant to stand firm in the face of adversity. She also recognized that leadership did not end with this incident. There were lessons to be learned, processes to improve, and a culture to reinforce. She made a mental note to hold meetings with her staff to ensure that everyone understood the expectations, the values of the store, and the importance of professionalism in every interaction. The CEO walked through the store, greeting employees and customers with a calm, reassuring smile. The atmosphere had shifted. The tension that had filled the store earlier was replaced with a sense of confidence and respect. Employees whispered to each other, impressed by how their leader had handled the situation with composure and authority. Customers noticed too, some nodding subtly in approval, others expressing admiration for the calm, professional handling of what could have been a chaotic moment. She also considered the broader implications. Stories like this often spread quickly, especially in small communities or among regular customers. She wanted to ensure that the narrative reflected integrity, professionalism, and accountability. Her actions were not about personal vindication. They were about demonstrating what true leadership looks like, even in uncomfortable circumstances. By the end of the day, the CEO had not only resolved the immediate conflict, but had also reinforced the culture she wanted to maintain in her store. Employees were reminded of the importance of respect, professionalism, and fairness. Customers saw firsthand that the store was led by someone who upheld high standards and would not tolerate behavior that compromised integrity. The former manager's departure marked a turning point. The staff understood that accountability was real, that leadership was firm but fair, and that the store's values were non-negotiable. This incident, while challenging, had become an opportunity to strengthen the culture, inspire confidence, and demonstrate the power of calm, decisive leadership. The CEO reflected quietly on the events. Leadership was never easy, especially when it required addressing uncomfortable truths or confronting unacceptable behavior. But she knew that by acting with integrity, clarity, and composure, she had not only resolved the immediate problem, but had also set a standard for the future. A standard that would shape the store, the employees, and the experience of every customer who walked through the doors. The day continued, but the lesson lingered. Leadership required courage, decisiveness, and a clear commitment to values. And in this moment, she had exemplified all of those qualities, turning a difficult situation into an opportunity to teach, inspire, and reinforce what truly mattered in her business. The moment the former manager left the store, a noticeable shift in energy filled the room. The tension that had gripped the employees and even some of the customers seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of relief and quiet admiration. The CEO stood tall, calm, and composed, fully aware that the real work was just beginning. Resolving the immediate issue was important, but ensuring that the culture of respect, professionalism, and accountability was reinforced across the entire team was equally crucial. She took a slow, deliberate walk through the store, greeting employees and acknowledging the customers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation. Her demeanor was calm and reassuring, and the employees who had been tense and uncertain now began to relax. They could see the strength in her composure, the clarity in her decision, and the fairness in her actions. In that moment, they understood that leadership was not just about giving orders. It was about setting an example, protecting the values of the business, and guiding others with integrity. Once she was confident that the immediate tension had eased, she called a quick team meeting. She gathered all employees in the main part of the store, where the natural light from the large windows created a warm, inviting atmosphere. Everyone was quiet, curious, and attentive. They knew something significant had happened, but they were unsure of the details. The CEO addressed them directly, her tone calm yet firm, commanding attention without needing to raise her voice. "I want to take a moment to talk about what happened earlier," she began. "It was a difficult situation, but it was also an important lesson for all of us. This store has always been about respect, professionalism, and integrity. Every person who walks through these doors, employee, customer, or supplier, deserves to be treated with dignity. Nothing less will be tolerated." The employees listened carefully, some nodding in agreement, others whispering quietly among themselves, clearly impressed by her calm authority. She continued, making sure her message was both clear and inspiring. "The actions of the manager earlier were unacceptable. They went against the values we have worked hard to uphold. That behavior will not be allowed, and steps have been taken to address it. I want each of you to understand that accountability is not optional. It is a core principle of how we operate." Her words were deliberate and measured, yet full of weight. She wanted the staff to understand that this was not a lecture born out of anger. It was a teaching moment, a clear demonstration of leadership and values. By calmly explaining the situation and the steps she had taken, she reinforced the idea that respect, professionalism, and accountability were non-negotiable. The CEO then shifted her focus slightly, speaking more personally to the employees.
I know situations like this can be uncomfortable.
You may have felt unsure about how to respond or even fearful about speaking up. I want you to know that your voice matters. If you see behavior that goes against our values, I expect you to raise it. We succeed not just because of the products we sell, but because of the culture we maintain. Every one of you plays a role in that. She paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. The employees exchanged glances, some whispering affirmations to one another, clearly inspired by her approach. She understood that leadership was not just about authority. It was about creating an environment where people felt valued, empowered, and confident to uphold the same standards. Next, she addressed the customers who had been in the store during the incident. They were still quietly observing, some showing curiosity, others admiration. She walked over to them with a warm, professional smile and said, "Thank you for your patience this morning. We had a staffing situation that needed attention, but it has been resolved. Our commitment to excellent service and respect for every individual remains stronger than ever." Her calm, confident explanation reassured the customers, and some nodded or whispered words of approval to one another. In just a few minutes, she had not only resolved an internal conflict but had also turned it into an opportunity to demonstrate integrity, professionalism, and leadership to everyone present. After addressing the immediate concerns, she turned her attention to longer-term solutions. She knew that one incident could easily be forgotten if the lessons were not reinforced. She decided to implement additional staff training, focusing on customer service, professionalism, and sensitivity. These sessions would ensure that every employee fully understood the standards of behavior expected and the values the store stood for. She also planned regular team meetings to encourage open communication and accountability. She wanted employees to feel comfortable raising concerns, asking questions, and discussing challenges without fear. By fostering an environment of transparency and respect, she could prevent similar incidents in the future and ensure that the culture she envisioned was fully integrated into daily operations. As she walked through the store, she took note of how employees were responding. Some were quietly talking to one another, clearly discussing what had happened and reflecting on the lessons learned. Others approached her, expressing quiet appreciation for the way she had handled the situation. Their respect was evident, not just for the authority she held as the CEO, but for the way she had acted with fairness, composure, and integrity. She paused briefly near the jewelry displays, looking around at the store she had built. Every detail, every carefully chosen piece, every employee working alongside her, it all represented not just business success, but the values and standards she held dear. She understood that leadership was as much about protecting these principles as it was about growing the business. The CEO knew that the way she handled the incident would have lasting effects. Employees would remember how she acted, how she maintained her composure, and how she enforced accountability without losing professionalism. Customers would also remember, seeing firsthand that this was a store led by someone who valued respect, fairness, and integrity above all else. She made a mental note to follow up with the staff individually over the next few days, checking in to ensure that everyone understood the expectations and felt supported. She wanted to create an ongoing dialogue about values and professionalism, reinforcing the lessons learned and ensuring that the culture of respect became deeply ingrained. Later, when the store had quieted down, she reflected on the events of the day. The incident had been uncomfortable and challenging, but it had also provided an opportunity to demonstrate leadership in action. By addressing the problem directly, calmly, and decisively, she had reinforced the standards of the store and set an example for both employees and customers. She knew that incidents like this could happen in any business, and it was how they were handled that defined the character of the leadership. By taking control, remaining composed, and acting with integrity, she had turned a potentially negative moment into a demonstration of courage, professionalism, and accountability. The employees gradually returned to their workstations, some still whispering quietly, reflecting on what they had witnessed. Customers continued to browse the displays, but now with a sense of reassurance, knowing that the store was managed with care, fairness, and respect. The atmosphere, once tense, was now calm and confident, a testament to the CEO's ability to lead effectively in challenging situations. Before leaving for the day, she held one final brief meeting with the staff. She reiterated her expectations, emphasizing that respect, professionalism, and accountability were the foundation of the store's culture. She also expressed appreciation for those who had remained calm and supportive during the incident, recognizing that they had contributed to maintaining the store's environment. Her message was simple but powerful. The store's values were non-negotiable, and every employee had a role to play in upholding them. Leadership was about setting standards, modeling behavior, and taking decisive action when those standards were compromised. By the end of the day, the CEO had not only resolved the conflict, but had strengthened the culture of her store. Employees understood the expectations more clearly. Customers were reassured of the professionalism they could expect, and the CEO herself had reinforced her own commitment to integrity and leadership. The incident had been challenging, but it had also provided an opportunity to demonstrate courage, fairness, and the kind of decisive action that earns respect and trust. She left the store that evening with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The events of the day had tested her patience and resolve, but she had handled them with clarity, composure, and integrity. The lessons learned would resonate not just for the employees, but for the culture of the store and the expectations of every customer who walked through the doors. In that moment, she knew that leadership was never just about managing tasks or overseeing operations. It was about standing firm in the face of challenges, making tough decisions with fairness and clarity, and setting an example that others could follow. By doing so, she had turned a difficult situation into an opportunity to strengthen the foundation of her business, inspire her team, and demonstrate the true meaning of leadership. The morning after the incident, the store felt different. There was a quiet confidence in the air, almost like a weight had been lifted. Employees arrived for their shifts with a sense of purpose, knowing that their workplace was one where respect, professionalism, and accountability were not just words on a wall, but principles actively practiced by their leader. The CEO walked in early, as she often did, taking a moment to observe her store and the employees preparing for the day. She felt a sense of satisfaction, not from the confrontation itself, but from how it had been handled and the impact it had on her team. She started by speaking individually with employees, making herself available to listen to their concerns, answer questions, and provide guidance. She knew that leadership was not just about giving orders or making decisions. It was about understanding the people she led and ensuring they felt supported and valued. Some employees shared how the previous day had made them uncomfortable, but also how they felt inspired by her calm authority. Others admitted they had been unsure how to act in that tense moment, but now felt more confident. Seeing firsthand how integrity and composure could resolve even the most challenging situations, the CEO took note of these conversations, understanding that moments like these were not just about resolving conflict. They were opportunities to strengthen relationships and build trust. She encouraged her team to speak up whenever they saw behavior that went against the store's values, reassuring them that their voices mattered. "We succeed together and we maintain the culture of this store together," she reminded them. Respect and professionalism are not optional. They are the foundation of everything we do. Later in the day, she met with the suppliers who had come in for the scheduled discussions. They had witnessed part of the previous day's confrontation and were curious about what had happened. She addressed the situation briefly and professionally, focusing on the actions taken and the values reinforced. "Yesterday, we had a staffing issue that needed immediate attention," she said, smiling warmly. "It was addressed, and our team is stronger for it. Here, respect, fairness, and professionalism guide everything we do."